I really don't think the embezzlement was a primary concern of ACORN's. ACORN, it was very hard for me to explain this to someone who asked me about it before. ACORN's concern has never been money. It's been power. And money is just an end to power. So if you cast ACORN in a way that says that they want to get a lot of money, that's incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
They want a lot of power. Mm-hmm. And power often needs money to stoke the fire. But that really has never been ACORN's intention. It's been about power. Mm-hmm. Power, because power is what pushes through social agendas. And they wanted to push through social agendas. So it's not ever been about money. So that's why the embezzlement was such an egregious thing to happen to ACORN, because it derailed it from its original mission that we perceived it to be. But it also derailed it because ACORN operates best when it's just below the surface, almost like a pimple that hasn't quite come up yet. You know it's there, but it hasn't shown yet. That's when ACORN's most effective. I often say the worst thing that could happen to ACORN was this last election cycle.
Do you think they'll keep their promises of not participating in voter registration drives in the future? Do you think they're really out of it, or is that just talk?
Oh, I don't know. My own experience with ACORN at this point is rather raw. So I would be surprised, but I do think that they'll never call it Project Vote again.
Matthew, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, and then I'll open it up to the floor. We talk about the government funding, but ACORN has its enablers in the private sector from surprising sources, I think, and your expertise is in uncovering those networks and funders and such. Could you talk about that and whether or not the private sources of funding from corporations and others are going to be negatively impacted by the recent problems?
Well, so far, a lot of the corporate foundations that fund ACORN have cut off ACORN. In the case of Citigroup, CEO Vikram Pandit said he was waiting for the Harshbarger hogwash to come out, and it came out, and I've called his office and didn't really get a clear answer. I was told that they're still considering it. They haven't decided what to do yet. ACORN gets so much of its corporate foundation money from big banks, which is not surprising, since big banks are its usual clients, or I should say victims, in their shakedown operations, and a lot of them have curtailed their contributions because of the adverse publicity surrounding ACORN, because of the vote, because of the hidden camera videos. But something where there hasn't been is lots of money is still coming in on the non-corporate foundation side. Like, for example, George Soros's Open Society Institute, as far as I know, is still funding ACORN. And a lot of the other big foundations are still funding ACORN. There are some diehard supporters of ACORN, such as some of the more obscure ones you might not have heard of, like the Need More Fund, which is devoted to community organizing, and various other radical groups, radical foundations like the Tides Foundation, which played a role in covering up the embezzlement. The founder, the head of it, Drummond Pike, personally wrote a check for about $700,000 out of his own bank account to cover the restitution, because the Rathke family was paying back the $1 million over time, and by the time the embezzlement was exposed publicly 8 years after the fact, $700,000 and change remained to be paid. So Drummond Pike personally wrote a check. Apparently, so that he wouldn't have to, so that the names of his donors would not have to be revealed. The Tides Foundation's a pretty shadowy outfit. It's a pass-through, and people can donate money to it, and then their donations are then handed out anonymously. So you can, if you're like a George Soros, for example, you write them a check. You get your tax deduction, and then the money just sits there until you tell them what to do with it, and then nobody knows that you're behind various things that you might not want to be associated with for business purposes.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to open up the floor to questions, and if you could keep your questions to questions, and we do have a microphone, so we encourage you to use them. Actually, wait for the microphone before you ask your question or make your comment. So, yes, right up front here.
You said that some of the money was coming from the federal government, which is taxpayer money, and if you get a grant or a contract from the federal government, when you get that grant, you're required to set up a system whereby the money is put in a pocket or whatever, if you will, and only that money can be used for that grant and for nothing else, only for the purposes what the grant is or the contract, either way. So it would seem to me that people who are working on a contract know. They know that they're working on a contract, and they know that their hours go into that contract or that grant. And, you know, it doesn't seem reasonable that they wouldn't understand that. Did you ever have an audit by the people, the grantor organization or the contractor organization, an audit that came in to see whether you in fact were segregating that money for that grant or that contract?
Are you aware of anything?
okay.
Yeah, Marcel.
All of the money went through CCI. And CCI, for financial purposes of ACORN, was exactly like the Tides Foundation. So no matter what check was written to ACORN, it went through CCI. And at that time, the funds might have been commingled. But because our board here in D.C. asked for 3 solid years for information about the funds, but we were never answered. We were always stonewalled. And because of that, we have no idea what happened to the money, because absolutely every grant that comes into Washington, D.C., for instance, is sieved through CCI. And then they make decisions where those funds are allotted. And because of that, you have absolutely no way of tracing the funds.
So the documents we uncovered from 1995 by the AmeriCorps program, where there was the audit of the one grant, you know, that resulted in some monies being returned. But as you point out, ACORN is more than just one organization. So the federal government can presumably fund essentially the same group, but under a different corporate name, and the misconduct doesn't apply across the board, or the prohibition doesn't apply across the board, and ACORN continues to receive funding through other means.
The other thing about this is that the Inspector General for the Department of Justice actually recently released a report. They were trying to take a look at whether ACORN had received any grants from the Department of Justice. And the report said that they hadn't gotten any grants directly, but I think they found about $200,000 that had gone to other organizations or gone to state and local governments, which then in turn had given some of that money out to ACORN. And in most of the cases, ACORN was unable to substantiate that they had done any of the work that they had gotten the grants for. Now, various ACORN housing organizations have gotten millions of dollars from the federal government, and I'm not aware that there's ever been any audits done by the Inspector General at HUD to make sure that those ACORN affiliates and subsidiaries which got federal tax dollars and got grants actually substantiated that they did any of the work that they were supposed to do. I mean, Matt, are you aware of any report by the IG on that? I'm not. And then that's something that needs to be done, and it's not being done.